chance to make the initial statement. Deputy.
Gomar, las Cancora agus well vehicles galas Cancora on chance hort gumsa on an officer a hort free frauds on our Minister. I'm delighted you're here in person to be here to discuss this issue with me. Can I on the outset, however, just express my disappointment that this House will be debating X-case legislation for the next 2.5 months, and parliamentary party meetings will be convulsed into heavy debate, and we will all be under intense pressure about an issue which has been dogging us for 20 years, yet when we have an issue pertaining to 6,300 children in care and their educational needs, it's one backbencher, namely me, who raises it. And I find the hypocrisy of that situation quite galling, and I find that hypocrisy pretty odious. However, I want to refer you, Minister, to the report yesterday published by the ESRI, commissioned by the Ombudsman for Children, Emily Logan, Education of Children in Care in Ireland, an explanatory study, and it details some of the difficulties that children in care have in maximising their educational potential. Some of the difficulties which I know you will be well aware of: attitudinal barriers, sometimes by those in the teaching profession and principals as well, placement breakdowns, inadequate care planning, and also delays and shortfalls in assessment. The Children's Ombudsman herself, who commissioned the report, says she was shocked at the lack of adequate information about schooling for children in care. She says when encountered, these challenges place children in care at higher risk of suspension, exclusion, absenteeism and early school leaving. But the issue here is that there doesn't seem to be any data within either your department, Minister, or Department of Education, or possibly obviously the Department of Health is involved here as well. And I find my experience with this situation is that, or situations like this, is that when there's a cross-departmental responsibility, sometimes situations like this fall through the cracks. So yes, we are dealing with your own departments, the Department of Health and the Department of Education. So essentially what the report says, in terms of data collection and research, it says the study highlights the need to establish a mechanism for systematically gathering data on the educational experiences of children in care in order to form evidence-based policy making. So we cannot have a policy in relation to children in care and how they're educated and how they maximise their educational potential unless we actually know effectively what we're dealing with. Now, there are some good news stories within this report. When children in care are placed in foster families, there is evidence to suggest that when they are in a stable family background that they can achieve their potential, and they do actually quite well. However, without the essential data and the requirements as outlined in the report, unless that is made available, or unless we have some scientific research as to the type of education experience of all these 6,300 young people who are in our education system, then we cannot properly plan for the future. These are the most vulnerable children in our education system, and that is an oft-used term. But these are children who have been placed into care because of particular dysfunction in their own family, or because of particular family situations that have caused them to be placed in care. They need the education system more than anybody else, because education is the great liberator. It is the one thing that can change your life. Regardless of what happens in your life experience, be you placed in care because of a family breakdown, if your relationship breaks down, if you get sick, if you become unwell, if you lose your job, the one thing that will always rescue you and ensure that you'll always bounce back is education. But if we have no basic data as to what is happening to the children who are in care, and if we're not digging deep into the reasons as to why they are falling out of the system, they're becoming, they're leaving the school system early, underachieving, well then that's a major failing on our own behalf. Now, I would, sorry, thanks, Cahill. So I would just pointedly ask you, Minister, are you aware of this report? Have you looked at its findings, and are you prepared to act on them?
Yes, thank you, Cahill. I have just received, and I welcome the research, Education of Children in Care in Ireland, an exploratory study, which was commissioned by the Ombudsman for Children, Miss Emily Logan. The educational outcomes of all children is, of course, a matter for my colleague, the Minister for Education and Skills. Monitoring issues relating to educational access and attainment are policy matters for that department. Notwithstanding that, of course, in cases where the state is providing alternative care for the child, it has the role of the parent in supporting any child or young person in their academic endeavours, as in all other aspects of their well-being. It is true that more information would assist in assessing the challenges for children and young people in care and how to maximise their outcomes across a range of indicators of their well-being, and education is certainly one of those important indicators. I totally agree with that, as you've highlighted again, Deputy. It is also worth noting that the group of children we're talking about is a cohort, and as a cohort is not static, with children moving in and out of the care system on a regular basis. So the process of tracking their progress can be complex. That needs to be recognised. However, I do want to say, and it's very important, Deputy, I want to assure you, that the HSE compiles regular performance reports, which include statistics in relation to children in care, in education. And in fact, this is a point I've been making since my appointment, precisely the point you make, that if we don't have proper statistics, if we don't have the data, how can we plan policy? And I was appalled at the lack of some of the data, which I sought to get in the early months when I took up my post. I was appalled that some of the data I was looking for was not available, and I have asked that more performance indicators are sought and that more information is got, and that is already happening, and we have to develop that more and more. Children in care were very hidden, it has to be said, away from public sight, not enough information. Thankfully, that situation has changed. Just yesterday, for example, I launched a new national advocacy service for children in care being run by EPIC, so the children in care will have a voice. So I think that, transparency about their experience in care is extremely important, and that includes transparency about their actual experience in relation to a whole host of issues, including education. So I have asked for more indicators. That is happening. And I want to say to you that for the first time now, because of my request, we now have firm data on the numbers of children and young people, for example, leaving care, in receipt of aftercare, and in education. And these reports are published on the HSE website. And I want to say, and I'm happy to report this, and I think we need to look at some of the good news in relation to children in care, as well as, of course, highlighting some of the problem areas. But the latest published reports show that in December 2012, very recent statistics, 96% of children in care between the ages of 6 and 16 inclusive were in full-time education. And that's a statistic we did not have before. Now, clearly there are other statistics we need about what happens to children when they leave care from an educational point of view, what kind of funding they get, and early school leaving needs to be examined in more detail, because we do know, as you have highlighted, that children who are in the care system can be very vulnerable, and some children more vulnerable than others. So I do want to assure you, and in fact I spoke to the Ombudsman yesterday in relation to this, that the issues raised in the report will be considered by the two departments as we move to the establishment of the Child and Family Agency. The links between the two departments are already very strong across a number of themes, but in particular the education welfare agenda, and the establishment of the agency with a broad base of both universal and targeted services with newly merged functions, including that of the National Education Welfare Board, who also come under the remit of the department, will help and enhance the potential for the two departments working well together in the interests of all children, but obviously in the interests of children who are in care. So we will consider further the issues raised in the report, and I'll do that, as I've said, in conjunction with my colleagues in the Department of Education and Skill. The Deputy will have seen that one of the main themes that emerged from the study related to the stability of care placements. The study found, of course, as you would expect, that a stable and supportive environment, whether it's a foster home or residential care unit, will enhance the young child's ability to do well in school and help their motivation and encourage them to have high aspirations, while in contrast, multiple care placements will, of course, disrupt their schooling. And just to reiterate here today that when a child is taken into care, the policy of the HSE and of the new agency will be to place that child, preferably in foster care, as close as possible to their home and community, so that those links with school can be maintained and continued. And when a child is being placed in foster care, the suitability of a placement with relatives is always explored in the first instance. And we are unique, and it's important to point this out, we are unique in that 92% of children in state care are currently placed with foster carers, unlike in other European countries where many children are in residential settings. For the small number of children, I'll just conclude, for that small number of children placed in residential care, the services have improved greatly in recent years, and there is much more focus on education. Children do often experience placement change, and I can give you some statistics in relation to that. 34% of all children in care up to 31st of December 2011 had been in their current placement for more than 5 years, and 42% had been in their current placement between 1 and 5 years. So there is a considerable degree of stability for children who are in the care system. So, as I say, I think it's important to get a balance in relation to this, that many children in care in Ireland have very good experiences, but clearly the issues highlighted in the report warrant further focus, and I want to assure you that they will get that. And as I've already said, I've asked for further indicators to make sure we have the kind of data that we need to have in order to focus on the issues which were highlighted in the report yesterday.
Thank you, Minister. Deputy, to respond, you have 2 minutes.
Yeah, and I appreciate the actually taking this regard. I mean, if the Minister for Children says that she's appalled and the Ombudsman for Children says that she is shocked at the lack of data, then I am comforted by the fact that you have sought to change that situation. And we cannot work on policy to empower these most vulnerable of young people unless we have statistics in place in order to empower us to do that. Can I ask you, could you possibly touch on the issue in relation to teachers and principals and their failings, and where schools are falling down, and how they're adapting to a young person who is in care? And do we need to have a circular sent out from the department in order to have a broad framework policy document in relation to this? Because it's one thing to have policy in place in terms of stats and all the rest of it. It's another thing to have a circular sent out from the department, guiding, encouraging, empowering, and demanding of schools to behave in a particular way. Just on the statistics there, you did say absolutely 96% of children in care between the ages of 6 and 16 inclusive are in full-time education, but that's the statutory requirement of people to be in school between those ages. The NEWB, as you have stated, doesn't deal with young people outside of those age brackets. So any child who's 4 or 5, it doesn't come under the remit of the NEWB, but we may be, by own bill, this hopefully comes before the House soon, may be able to deal with that. But again, the NEWB does not deal with any young person aged 16, 17 or 18. I think that's also a failing that perhaps the National Education Welfare Board, which is under your own department, may be able to address. But I am comforted by the fact that you have raised these issues in relation to the data. But again, could you just ensure, just for the record of the House again, that the outstanding recommendation of the report in terms of a mechanism for systematically gathering data on the education experience of children in care to inform evidence-based policy making, that we are doing that, and that will be done, and that we are. That's the central issue.
Thank you very much, Minister.
I think the report may well point, and I think it does, to the need for further performance indicators, which encapsulate the points that you've made in relation to the 16 to 18-year-old. What precisely is the educational experience that those young people who are in care are having? And I certainly, along with the Department of Education, can examine, the further gathering of those kind of performance indicators so that we have the data. So we'll certainly examine the report to see how we can further develop the data that we have. I've no doubt that is needed, because, as I say, I've begun to get more information, so we have more information coming in, but it's not comprehensive yet, and we'll certainly follow that up. You make an interesting point in relation to the statutory services, whether it's education, or indeed I would include health as well, how these services relate to children who are in care, and the need for an understanding of the child's experience and making sure that the service is responding appropriately to those those children. The principals, when I meet them, talk about needing to get a better partnership from the HSE in response to, for example, concerns that they might raise. When I speak with the HSE, they want a better partnership with the schools. So I think there are two sides to it, and we do need to see better engagement, better partnership as far as children in care are concerned between the statutory agencies, and greater awareness about the particular needs of children in care, because they are, as I said, and can be a very vulnerable group, and schools need to be very alert to that. And I like your suggestion in relation to the possibility of sending around a circular, perhaps encapsulating some of the issues that arise. So I can take that up with the Department of Education.
Sir.